I don't know. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. They're just saying the meeting's being recorded. That's fine. I represent an informal group of people with disabilities who've been advocating for the STAR program for many, many years. And last spring, in the spring of 2022, we formed a group called Save Our STAR. And this was at a time when there were some proposed policies that the county came up with that were very misguided and restrictive. And we worked with Libby Garvey and Matt DeFerranti, and we met with county staff, Dr. Wang, when she took over in last spring, and we were able to stop, have them withdraw these policies. So that just gives you a little background about who I am and who our little group is. We have concerns, though, about the way the Transit Advisory Committee and specifically the Accessibility Subcommittee is operating. We do not feel that our public comment there is being taken seriously. And we don't get responses to our questions. We don't get straight answers. There's no dialogue with county staff that's meaningful. We just don't feel that we're not able to be proactive. We're just reacting to whatever they put out. We don't get timely meeting notices. We don't get minutes in a timely way. Bottom line is we have been working with Alexa Mavroidis, who I know is a member here as well. And she's great. She's only got a 3-person subcommittee, though. And we are wanting to propose that be expanded to 7 people with a variety of disabilities, because we thought that would be one way to increase the input of folks with disabilities that would be more meaningful. And we want to have a meeting with John Carton, who is the chair of the Transit Advisory Committee. He has not been particularly supportive to date. He feels that it's just a few disgruntled folks with disabilities that are complaining, and that's not true. So we wrote a letter to him, kind of outlined our concerns. We're going to have folks sign on to it. Now, given that you don't have a quorum, I don't even know if this is appropriate. I was going to share the letter with you all and see if folks wanted to share to sign on as individuals. Doris has been working with us also. And the bottom line is we really want to be proactive, to work with the staff, and we don't feel the needs of people with disabilities are really being considered. And since you all are the Disability Advisory Commission, we thought that you should be made aware of these concerns if you're not already aware. And again, I throw this out to you. If you are interested in seeing the letter we've currently written, I'm happy to send it to someone. And we would love to work more closely with you on transportation issues. So thank you. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions?
You can let her know.
How about on the phone first?
Hi, this is Elizabeth. I just want to let you know I joined. I'm in Chicago with very bad internet. So thanks.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
I'm sorry, there's no physical quorum, so members can't join virtually.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that, but you've got a nice, okay. Sorry about that. Talk to you later.
Okay, no worries. I'm recording it and I'm going to send it out to all the commissioners for review.
Fabulous. Thank
Okay.
you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Anybody in the room who wants to say anything?
Just comment that, we do share the same frustration with county staff, particularly in the transit bureau. I would like to review the letter and hopefully discuss that amongst the commission next meeting.
May I ask your name? I don't know.
Sorry. Yes, my name is Bryant Atkins, and I'm one of the commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Very good.
Now, Roseanne, this is Courtney Sells. You can send me the letter and I can disperse it to all commissioners for review.
I will do that later this evening. Thank you.
Anybody else in the room?
This is Commissioner Karen Odont, so I concur with Brian and would welcome the opportunity for the commission to review your letter.
Okay. And even if you all don't sign off on it, because we are going to be wanting to meet with him very, very soon, I want you to be aware of our concerns, because perhaps in the future we can work collaboratively.
Yeah, and then also interested in the idea of expanding that subgroup. This is Bryant again. Question for Courtney. That subgroup, it's under the Transportation Commission. So the Transportation Commission would have to request the county board to expand.
Actually, it's not the transportation. We need to clarify that. So it is the Transit Advisory Committee. And so it's a committee that reports to the county manager. Anything that's called a committee reports to the, is appointed by and reports to and makes recommendations to the county manager. So it's very operationally oriented, although it can be policy oriented. Many of the consumers wish that that it were a subcommittee of the commission, because things like ADA paratransit policies and operating procedures really should be handled at that level, especially if there's going to be a parallel with WMATA, which used to report to the general manager only, but was rechartered in 2010 to report directly to the WMATA board. So nonetheless, the problem seems to be, and others, is Alexa on here?
No,
Is Alexa?
she could.
No, okay. So, but others, if you want to consult Alexa or others, the important thing here is that the committee right now, at least was designed bylaws wise to include only members who are currently serving on the the Transit Advisory Committee, and the Accessibility Subcommittee was actually originally chartered to take up both fixed route and paratransit issues. But the way they're operating now, it's not a big enough group, and the group is only meeting once an hour, and transportation is a big topic, and it's also actually probably the most common issue of concern to people with disabilities across all disabilities if you don't drive. So, and for drivers as well, because nothing prevents somebody who drives their own vehicle from riding Star, for example, or riding the bus, the ARC bus. So, I think that the group would still be interested in people being involved in this advocacy as well. So, anything else you want to add, Roseanne? Or, I was thinking that we might be able to make a motion on this to support, address our support perhaps to the county board, because this group has been also working with the county board. But
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we would love for you to make a motion of support, I think the notion of entertaining the possibility that this would become part of the Transportation Commission makes a lot of sense. What we're trying to do is deal with the current circumstances, which is that the subcommittee, the accessibility subcommittee is under the Transit Advisory Committee. So we're trying to deal with this situation right now, but I think we do need to entertain some longer term goals. And that would be a good one.
And I think now the currency right has to do also with the fact, I've been attending the TAC meetings. So the currency has to do in part with the fact that the county is about to establish a new contract for STAR.
Yes, exactly. And they surveyed people. The survey was very inadequate. This letter explains some of that. And they're going to have a public meeting supposedly in December. Who knows how much notice we'll get? You know, it's this type of thing. It's a continuing saga of the same kind of behavior. And we really need to figure out a way to intervene so that we have a different story, you know. We don't want a repetition of the same thing that's been happening for years and years.
Anything else anybody has? Okay.
No.
I guess say again.
No, I'm good.
How could we, there's no way for us to proceed tonight, right?
Right, no, we don't have.
With anything, there's no way to even write any kind of letter or anything without having a motion or vote.
Correct.
Yeah, I was just checking. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you. We'll be back.
So the next thing I think is
Brian.
complete streets.
Yes.
Or is there anybody else who's making public comment?
That was the only public comment.
Okay.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Good.
We hear you in the room, I think.
Okay. It says that my presentation is loading. So I'm here tonight to present or share with you an update to a Neighborhood Complete Streets project. It's a shared streets pilot project. For many of you, it's probably the first time you're hearing of this tonight. My name is Brian Shelton. I'm the project manager for this project. I'm also the active transportation planner in transportation planning and capital projects. For tonight, I'd like to share with you a quick outline, starting with the Neighborhood Complete Streets program. We'll dive into shared streets. We'll define shared streets and how they fit into the Arlington County context. We'll present then some of the shared street pilot projects ideas, and then also share a timeline and some of the locations that are under consideration for the pilot projects currently. So to begin, the Neighborhood Complete Streets program was initiated in 2014 after the Neighborhood Traffic Calming program was retired. The goal of the program is to address issues of safety and accessibility on Arlington's local streets to make streets safe and comfortable for all who travel, whether by walking, biking, riding transit, or even in a vehicle. The program has been funding and building capital projects to reach this goal on an annual basis since 2020. Streets are identified by the public through a simple online application. All nominated streets are scored based on objective criteria that consider the existing conditions of the street. This can be a history of automobile collisions, vehicle travel speeds, and other activities in the area near each location. So this can be the proximity to schools, bus stops, metro stops, shopping areas, things of that nature. Once scored, the streets are then ranked into a prioritized list of streets for funding. Staff and the Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission work together to identify which top-ranked streets will be advanced into Neighborhood Complete Streets projects. And then projects undergo a period of public engagement and preliminary design and are considered at a public funding hearing for recommendation by the Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission. Eventually, these projects will get approval from the Arlington County Board. To date, the Neighborhood Complete Streets program has funded 4 pilot and 9 capital projects with a total investment of $4.25 million in improvements on Arlington's neighborhood streets. But not all the locations on the project list are able to accommodate new sidewalks. This is where the shared streets projects come into place. Many of the locations on the ranked list of streets lack a complete sidewalk. The width of county-owned right-of-way is set. Many elements of the street need to fit within that space, such as street trees, utility poles, space for travel lanes, and on-street parking. They all need to be balanced since they're important features of a neighborhood street. Sometimes topography can be an issue. It makes it too expensive and too hard to add sidewalks, oftentimes requiring retaining walls. Not necessarily expensive for the county, but within the ability of the Neighborhood Complete Streets program to fund such a project. As a result, the space from the curb to curb is shared between people walking, biking, and driving. The street needs to be wide enough to allow for emergency services to perform their important duties, but streets that are currently sharing space between all users could be improved to make them safer and more comfortable. So we do have a shared street. The streets element of the Arlington County Master Transportation Plan offers a solution, which is a shared street. Shared streets are defined as a local street where the needs of motor vehicles are generally secondary to the needs of pedestrians, bicyclists, and other roadway users. For tonight's presentation, we'll be focusing on designs for neighborhood shared streets, which look and feel a lot different than some of the commercial shared streets. Additional guidance from the National Association of City Transportation Officials defines neighborhood shared streets as places where there is insufficient sidewalk in which children play and people walk, sharing the roadway with drivers. Shared streets can meet the desires of adjacent residents and function foremost as a public space for recreation, for socializing, and for leisure. Many streets in Arlington already function as a shared street. However, we are missing some of the treatments which would enhance pedestrian comfort on these roadways. And so I have 2 images on the screen. The one on the left is a commercial shared street. It's a place where cars share the road with the users in the street. There are design elements that help slow the cars down, and even parking lanes can do this as well. The image on the right we have, it's from South Kent Street in Arlington. It's one of these streets where the travel lane width is too narrow to add a sidewalk, and it's kind of a quiet neighborhood street, but it's still not really functioning as a shared street yet. The National Association of City Transportation Officials presents guidance for the design of shared streets. Some of the recommendations that I have on the screen here, like the elimination of curbs and reducing the setback from the street to the house, are not suitable for Arlington County. And the image is depicting apartments and townhomes directly abutting a street that does not have a curb. There's parking directly in front of the townhomes. And so this isn't something that we necessarily have in Arlington County. Typically, we have single family homes, even townhomes, or some of our apartment dwellings. There's a grass utility strip, and then you have your street. So it does look a little bit different than the image being presented here. There are, however, some mid-block and street entrance treatment options, which we can use to slow down traffic. So these would be chicanes. We can often use parking to help slow down traffic as cars have to maneuver around parked cars. We can also use bike racks and corrals. There are also some street entrance treatment options, which can help reinforce the idea that the street is being shared with pedestrians and cyclists. These would be yellow advisory signs with cautionary speed limits, and they can also be pavement markings. And county staff, we looked for precedents kind of around the United States that were being used, also from around the world. I have two of them presented here. One is a very large bicycle stamp. And then I have another image, which is a yellow cautionary sign with a pedestrian and a cyclist. Underneath it says share the road, and then a cautionary speed of 5 miles an hour. The large image, at least on the left-hand side of the bicycle, is installed on streets where bicycle traffic is intended to take precedence over motorized vehicle traffic. And engineering, Vision Zero, and transportation planning staff designed the shared street stamp on the left and the shared street sign assembly on the right. I'll start first with the shared street stamp. It is a large orange circular stamp with a 12-inch white border. It's meant to be reflective, and it's meant to fill the travel lane width of the street. Within that circular, within the orange circle is a pedestrian logo and a bicyclist logo. And underneath both the logos is the text shared street. The bicyclist and the pedestrian are intended to be painted white with also a reflective coating, just to enhance the visibility, especially in the evening hours. On the right-hand side, I have a shared street sign. It's going to be a cautionary sign, and it says shared street in the middle of it. We have an advisory speed of 15 miles an hour. That'll be placed at the street entrance, so that cars entering the street, they see the sign, but then they also see the stamp, and then also see the recommended speed limit of 15 miles per hour. The reason we went with 15 miles an hour, the Master Transportation Plan for Arlington County recommends the speed limit for shared streets. And then here's just to give another idea of what this might look like in the road. Again, it's that shared street, it's that shared street stamp that's placed right before the parking as cars would enter the roadway. It does span the entire road or the travel lane width, which can be at least 20 feet. In some cases, it can be even less. And then to the right, you have the shared street sign with the advisory speed limit of 15 miles per hour. We have 3 street locations that we've selected. These 3 locations, they scored highly on the Neighborhood Complete Streets list for project recommendations, but because of some of the constraints of the street, we are unable to provide a sidewalk at this time. The first is South Lynn Street. This is in the Arlington Ridge neighborhood from 16th to 20th Street. Some of the challenges that we had here was that steep topography. We also had a number of street trees and utility poles, and then parking that was on both sides of the street. What makes this qualified to be a pilot project for the shared streets, that there's a low traffic volume of it's about 126. It lacks complete sidewalk infrastructure. There's proximity to several transit stops. It's near Crystal City and the Pentagon City metro stations. Some of the challenges that we have to face in our design is that automobile speeds range from 12 to 30 miles per hour. We also have a reported crash with injury. The second street that we're examining for the pilot project is North Wakefield Street. This is in the Bluemont neighborhood from Carlin Springs to Wilson Boulevard. Again, it shares some of the same similarities with Lynn Street. It has a high parking demand. There are utility poles on both sides of the street. There are obstructions in the right-of-way. And then again, there are some street trees that the neighbors would like to preserve. The street does fall within an acceptable range for traffic volume. It's 1,271 automobiles. The speeds, again, of the automobiles are quite high, from 16 to 32 miles per hour. But again, it has that proximity to commercial centers like Boston Quarter shops and grocery stores nearby, some schools, and again, proximity to transit stops and metro stops. The last street that we've selected for the pilot project is 12th Street South. This is from South Glebe Road to Walter Reed Drive. Again, we have a high parking demand, and we are looking to preserve some of the street trees on the street. The curb width of the street varies from 26 feet to 31 feet. Similar to Lynn Street, there's low vehicular volume. It's about 140 cars. The automobile speeds, again, are going to be a bit of a challenge, from 11 to 36 miles per hour. And again, some of the additional qualifiers is that it's located near the Columbia Pike businesses, a number of schools, and transit stops as well. And that completes my presentation. The project is open for public comment. I can drop the link into the chat. Public comment will be available up until December 3rd. Right now, we're just looking for any experience that users might have as they move down the street. We haven't finalized a design yet. We really haven't even gone to engineering yet, except in the design of the shared street sign assembly and the stamp. Once we receive public comment and feedback, we will then take all of that to design.
Anyone have a comment?
This is Commissioner Karen Odont. Just a question for Brian. As somebody, this concept is fairly new to me, and so this idea that you're going to paint the entire width of the lane and indicate that it's a shared street, in my humble opinion, gives the impression that there will be sidewalks and it'll be safe to navigate if you're in a wheelchair or other means of mobility. So is there any special marking when it's marked as a shared street that indicates that there are no sidewalks?
No, that has not been discussed yet. And we would welcome an open conversation.
Anything else?
No.
Have anything?
Nope, all good here.
So, and can we call upon the virtual folks or not?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
I will.
Anybody on the phone has any questions, comments? Okay, I'll go for the moment. I'm wondering, so are you saying that you're going to do away with sidewalks and curb ramps, or you're going to flatten them out or something? Is that what I heard?
No, so part of the Neighborhood Complete Streets program is to provide sidewalks where sidewalks do not exist on some of our neighborhood streets. And in many cases, we do not have enough space in the right-of-way to provide for a sidewalk. We're at the point where we have a number of projects on the list. They have been on the list since 2020, and there's nothing that we can do with them. We don't necessarily want to say no just yet. We do want to try to find some alternatives to provide kind of a safer space for pedestrians to walk in the street. What we've observed on the 3 streets that were listed tonight, that'd be South Lynn Street, North Wakefield Street, and South 12th Street, is that people already use the street to walk, to bike, to scoot, whatever it is. And they're already in the road. They're already in the road with traffic, sometimes in the road with speeding traffic. And so what we're looking to do is to, again, create a safer space by informing the automobile drivers that this road is kind of acting in a different way. It's acting in a more unusual way than what someone might be used to. So we figure the way to do that, at least right now, is through signage and then also the stamp.
And so the one in Crystal City, could you say again? I'm just curious because I work over there.
South. Oh, I'm sorry.
You said it's near Crystal City and
No.
Pentagon City Metro?
Yeah, so that would be the South Lynn Street location in the Arlington Ridge neighborhood. It's from 20th Street to 16th Street. It's up the road or up the hill a bit from Crystal City, and then same for Pentagon City for both those metro stops.
So is this something that would be maybe in a, you said neighborhood versus commercial, right?
Correct.
Would this be something that could be located, for example, up in Arlington Forest or up on Route 50, Arlington Forest or Brumont? Or
It could.
would it be on the primary road like Arlington Boulevard?
No, we would not recommend this treatment for an arterial, for example. Something like Arlington Boulevard, this would not be recommended, or Glebe, George Mason Drive, or Langston Boulevard. Those routes are primarily for motor vehicle traffic. Again, these are just on the neighborhood streets.
Okay. So down in Crystal City, I'm curious. And maybe again, like I work on Crystal Drive, and one of the things that I've noticed, they put the bike lanes in there, and therefore, even though this is a kind of mixed neighborhood, but it has a lot of multifamily. That they're being constructed with bike lanes that impede like vehicles like taxis, Uber, or even Star, for example, pulling up and letting people off. And so I'm just curious if these are going to have bike lanes, is that going to be that kind of problem for the people who are living up there and might arrive in it?
We'd have to examine it on a case-by-case basis. But for the three locations that we've selected for the pilot project study, we do not have enough space in the right-of-way to provide for bike lanes. A bike lane would require about 5 feet. If we wanted a bike lane, we would have to remove parking. But then we again don't have enough space in the right-of-way to do that, and then the parking, at least from what we've observed, there wouldn't be the ability to remove parking. I don't even think we could suggest it right now. So to have a bike lane requires a certain amount of space in that right-of-way, and for these projects, we do not have enough space.
So any other questions from any member? Okay, I guess that's about it, and you're leaving us the information to.
That's correct. I sent Courtney the PowerPoint, and then also provided a link to the website in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so next we have
Performance parking pilot project.
Melissa, right behind you.
Yep, I'm just trying to click on the share content. Hang tight.
so we have PowerPoint.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Melissa McMahon. I'm parking and curb space manager. Sorry, still got a black screen up there, so I'm pausing to see if it will resolve.
If not, I have it up.
Hang tight, I'm gonna try another approach. Pardon me, sorry for the delay. Okay, now I think we have it up there. Great. Again, my name is Melissa. I am parking and curb space manager for the county. I came and visited you all in February toward the beginning of our pilot project. So this is performance parking pilot project in commercial corridors. So I'll go over in my presentation a quick refresher on what the project's about, what we've experienced and achieved to date, our outreach and engagement, and some results from that. As well as what some of our data is starting to look like. And I'll get into more detail for new folks who haven't heard about the project before, about what those data are all about, how we're hoping to measure success, and the key really for this is to give you the update on our request for advertisement for temporary ordinance changes, which we are hoping to put before the board in December for an action in January. So a quick review of our policy foundation and the project purpose. The Master Transportation Plan Parking and Curb Space element, Policy 5, asks us to utilize parking meter pricing strategies that vary by hour and location to better match parking availability and demand. And so really this project comes straight out of the Master Transportation Plan as an effort to make metered parking spaces more available more often where you're looking for them by sharing useful information about parking options in real time and ultimately reducing the negative impacts associated with the search for parking. The pilot project does not seek to increase overall parking meter revenue. It does not increase all metered parking rates across the board. It does not decrease the number of reserved ADA accessible parking spaces. It is not designed to create dynamically or fast-changing metered pricing. In other words, it's not like the express lanes on 66 or 495, and it's not like surge pricing by ride-hail companies. This project will not change the type of curbside use from metered parking to something else entirely. And we importantly want to point out too that it doesn't commit the county to a specific path in the long run. It is a pilot. So we're trying something new and we hope to learn a lot from it and move forward with what we learn. This slide shows a map of the project areas. And so our project covers about 4,500 metered parking spaces in our two Metro Rail corridors. So the Roslyn-Ballston corridor and the Crystal City, Pentagon City, Potomac Yard, sort of Route 1 corridor. And to date, since we met in February, we undertook essentially what we would call the phase 1 of our project, which was the building out of our infrastructure. And installation of that infrastructure is now largely complete. So we have about 4,200 sensors in those spaces. We delineated those spaces, so now parkers know what space to park in, and there's one sensor per space. And we installed our gateways, which send the sensor data up to the cloud so that we can analyze it. We also conducted outreach with the first phase, and that outreach was primarily around project awareness and asking people to help us prioritize among our project goals. So really trying to gut check what were the biggest priorities for how we could influence metered parking activity. There were 135 responses to an open feedback form, which was open for quite a while, February through July. And we put over 600 decals with QR codes on the multimeters in the project area. And through those decals achieved over 1,700 visits to our project page from those codes. We also conducted 4 pop-up events totaling about 100 interactions in June and July. So we visited folks at 3 farmers markets and a performance of jazz at Met in the new HQ2 open space. Another key feature of our outreach and engagement in this first phase of our project was actually door-to-door outreach to over 260 businesses and large residential buildings. Because we were going to be in the streets, closing off access to parking space a bit to put in those sensors, we wanted to make sure the businesses knew why we were there, knew that we were coming. So we actually did knock on door-to-door and provide flyers and information about the project in advance of all of that construction activity. I also presented at several types of commissions and committee groups throughout the course of the spring, and then I'm in the process of, I call a second round roadshow this fall, and this fall's round is really focused again on the ordinance changes we'll be requesting. So some key highlight results from our first phase, and this is results from the outreach. People are really interested in improving their experience with parking, especially where the solution saves them time. People are also excited to see existing conditions and how we track outcomes with the data. So this is really data about our occupancy. These sensors are going to tell us whether a car is there or not in real time, 24/7, and it's data we've never had before. Disabled parkers who responded to our feedback form and engaged with us want to retain good access to the street, and they are concerned about paying higher rates since more distant, cheaper options may not be as feasible for them. And that is important feedback. So we did see some variability between the feedback form responses and our pop-ups. Out of the feedback form, we heard travel time, confidence in finding parking on the first try, and ease of finding parking as the most important priorities. And in our pop-ups, we also heard as the most important priorities, reducing mobile emissions, reducing double parking, as well as spending less time looking for parking. And there were 16% of responses to the feedback form reported a disability that impacts their mobility. And those respondents in particular seem to value more highly than other respondents less double parking, less time looking for parking, people shifting to less well-used blocks, and greater enforcement. And we have a full summary on our webpage of these outreach results. We also we're excited that as a part of the project, not only are we going to be using price to influence parking behavior, but we're going to have new information for parkers to help them with their trip planning. We're going to be releasing 2 different visualizers. These are sort of mobile-friendly interfaces, but also available on the web for seeing how available the parking is on any given block, how many spaces are available, and their relative availability as well as price. And so we're looking forward to getting feedback from the community on the relative benefit of each of these types of visualization and how we can think about making things better for folks' decision making in the future. So it really is important that we're doing 2 things. We'll be working with price, but also working with new information. So hopefully people can make decisions based on both of those. We will be releasing a public API for third-party developers and researchers so that they can also use these data in their applications. We will be demonstrating and testing dynamic message displays in the right-of-way so that we aren't necessarily only asking for people to look at their phone when they're driving, but actually when they get to the neighborhood, they will see displays that show relative availability and price in different directions that they could turn. And it'll be interesting because we can even show accessible spaces and their availability and price, depending on what we choose to put on those displays. We will also be preparing and releasing a public-facing Power BI dashboard for more, allowing the community to do more data exploration with us. So a slide on data. Just want to talk about very high level, the ways that we're able to be looking at things at this point. By neighborhood, we can look at occupancy trends over time, and I've got some charts on this page that are showing the difference between seeing midday peaks, which we see in a lot of neighborhoods, as well as evening peaks, which we see in some neighborhoods as well. And between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. is where our meters currently operate. But we can see from our data that it is sometimes outside of meter operating hours that we see some of the highest occupancy. And we'll be talking about that with the community and looking at those data very closely as we think about how to use price to influence behavior and where that's necessary. This slide is also showing data on a map level. So this is a very specific neighborhood. This is Pentagon City. And this is showing a 3-hour weekday peak between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And it's showing that on those red block faces, the occupancy is over 80%. On blue block faces, the occupancy is less than 40%. And on the white block faces, the occupancy is in between 40 and 80%. And this is just an example of how we can look at these things geographically and think about how.
You have a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question since we're on this map.
Mm-hmm.
Could you pinpoint where HQ2 is?
Yes. Okay. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just-
So it is the building outlines that you see there today are not really the right ones.
Yeah.
So it's this space in here,
Okay.
and this middle space is that open space in the middle of the HQ2. So these are existing buildings that are the the Met Park earlier phases. Yeah. So it's right in here. This big giant block over here is the Costco.
Okay.
And this little square is that Costco parking deck. And now, there's like a whole new building over here. Yeah, so things are changing faster than this base layer is showing us.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is just a slide. I'm going to skim over it in the interest of time, but this is our process. It's iterative. So really every 3 months we would analyze data, propose price changes, and then communicate them out and implement them, and then analyze data again on essentially a 3-month iterative process. So today, we need to move on to the next phase of the project, which is to request the temporary ordinance that this pilot needs for us to be able to make administrative changes to price. And today our meter rates are set by code, so only the board can change them. And I think I mentioned it at the beginning, the request to advertise, we anticipate going to the board in December. And I think, and with an action, if all goes well, slated for January. These next couple slides summarize some of the key points of the ordinance, features of the ordinance that we're proposing. So the ordinance will only apply to meters in the project area, and it will retain in code the existing ordinance language that's necessary to govern meters that are elsewhere in the community. And it will have a sunset clause. So without further board action, the proposed changes would fully expire and disappear roughly February 1, 2026, if we do not come back to the board with sufficient additional information and changes that they would want to act upon. The authority for making price changes or rate changes to the meters during the course of the project is delegated to the manager or designee, and the frequency of those adjustments is no more than quarterly. We propose that rates may be increased in response to high demand or decreased in response to low demand. We're not specifying specific thresholds because we anticipate we really are going to have to look at both the occupancy data and the community experience with parking in order to determine if the thresholds we're using are actually the right ones. We propose that permissible duration of stay in each space, that's what you know today as a time limit on that metered space. It could change, but it's decoupled from the rate. So we're not proposing blanket changes to time limits because that would require a lot of sign changes. But a good example of how we might, in a micro fashion, adjust time limits is if we see through duration of stay data, so the occupancy data showing the turnover of vehicles in a space, that it's highly turning over, but the space is for 2 hours and the duration of stay is 10 minutes max, then we might want to change the regulation on the space. And vice versa, if cars are staying much longer than the posted time limit, it might suggest that there are land uses nearby that demand a longer time limit, and might help to think about right-sizing those time limits to the user bases that are nearby. We do not propose initial changes to prices of ADA spaces. So as we are coming out of the gate at the beginning of the project, we are not proposing changes to ADA or accessible space prices today, but rather a separate analysis will be conducted on the occupancy of those spaces. We can differentiate them, and we will be looking at them as unique uses to make sure that we understand what's going on with them before we propose changes. I did hear a concern earlier in my outreach that we have to be careful about how cheap they appear compared to nearby spaces, because we did experience in the past fraudulent use of placards because the placard gave you free parking and otherwise you had to pay. And so that does seem to be the origination of why all may park, all must pay, and the accessible spaces are paid for today in order to decrease the attractiveness of that sort of fraudulent activity. So I am conscientious of that, and that will be an interesting factor to take into account as we move forward. Other key features of our ordinance proposal, rates may differ throughout the day and week, and days and times of metering may be adjusted. So like I said, today our meters by and large operate from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But we may determine with occupancy data that extending the duration of metered hours into the evening in some locations is warranted, for instance. So we wanted to make sure that stays on the table. The rate structure is expected to vary geographically. And we have a proposed clause that would allow us to work with rates that escalate during a single parking session. And an escalating rate structure has been used in other communities to actually allow you to get around the need to put time limits on a space, because if the first hour is a lower cost and the second hour of your parking stay is a higher cost and the third hour is yet higher cost, it naturally encourages people to move along, and you would tie that kind of escalation structure to the needs of that particular block and neighborhood according to what's going on there. So it's a slightly more complex approach that's different than what we see today on the street. So it's, again, not something that we expect to see in the first months of the pilot, but over the duration of the 2 years, we wanted to leave it on the table as something that we could try if it made sense for certain neighborhoods and certain blocks. Rates may be adjusted up or down in whatever increments would achieve the project goals. So we're leaving that open. However, we anticipate that if we adjust rates down for very low occupancy areas, it would be with geographic respect to high occupancy areas, because we want to make sure we're giving a chance to motivate people who have a better alternative to park in the low occupancy place, and we can use reductions strategically in that way. But those reductions also may not have to be at the same magnitude as increases. So we want to make sure there's flexibility on the increments that we adjust. We anticipate starting with an upward adjustment of $1 in the first price change, and then seeing from there what kinds of adjustments might be useful. And different than the slides that I distributed earlier, in this continued engagement with our various stakeholders, we are coming from an original proposal of rates may not exceed. We were actually looking originally at $10 per hour, then $7 per hour, and now we're right around at $5 per hour of what we're anticipating to advertise. This is over the course of the entire project, and with the understanding that, for instance, with a quarterly price change, you only have so many bites at the apple over 2 years. But we also don't expect to be increasing rates in a given location ignorant of the fact that they're not sensitive to price. So we are going to be looking at responsiveness to the price change while we're deciding whether or not it makes sense to increase again in these subsequent changes. And in other jurisdictions, who have done projects such as this, the $5 per hour threshold has been a pretty common one that we've seen. And there's upcoming outreach this fall and winter. So we do have a new recorded presentation available on our webpage, which goes into a little bit more detail than this one for you. We have an open house coming up December 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. at the Navy League building across the way here. And that open house will have lots of boards with more data and information on a neighborhood basis, as well as more information on our outreach and more detail, but on the same topics that I've hit on today. We'll also go back and provide a bunch of information on our technology, which is something that I didn't touch upon as much this time. And we encourage anyone in the community to come along and join us for the open house and ask questions. Yeah, we have additional outreach planned coming up. So that's really the conclusion of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions or comments.
This is Commissioner Karen Odon. I have a number of questions. So I heard you say that you're going to put out a public API for developers to develop apps for it. So right now, are you working with a third-party vendor for this project? Or
Yes.
Is it, okay.
Yes, so this project is fully funded, 100% funded by a VDOT Innovation and Technology Transportation Fund grant. And from having those grant funds, we procured a vendor partner. And so I'm just flipping back to that slide about public information, because both of these visualizers are two different vendor partners on the team providing them.
Okay.
And so those are their versions, and we really felt like the project had to come out of the gate with proof of concept of what this kind of thing could be. But the API, the public API, and that open data access platform that the county will facilitate will let other entities, such as Park Mobile, which everyone's using and is one way people pay today for their meter parking, can have the opportunity to grab those data and display them.
Okay, and I asked because I was very just curious about accessibility. And this is not what you're talking about tonight, but the system that's been installed in the Ballston parking lot is just wretched.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I paid twice this morning just so I could exit. And so I'm sighted, I have full mobility, and I just don't think that system is accessible for folks with visual impairments or any sort of mobility challenges. So that's why I asked about the accessibility. And then the other question, I think I'm confused. So I heard you say it's not surge pricing, it's not, the rates will be set. And so I guess my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is there will be the same number of the ADA sites. But what I'm hearing is it might be that a more desirable location closer in, it's going to be it could be a higher rate, necessitating walking further if you didn't want to pay that higher rate. So it could be somebody who doesn't necessarily have that placard to use an ADA site, but might be forced to walk a considerable distance after they park.
Yeah, we've heard from different stakeholders. We know that equity concerns regarding affordability of parking are present. And the principle behind the pricing strategy is that today in some of these areas, there's no place to park. So they already have to walk because you can't find a space, but parkers lack data about where they're not going to find space. So they don't know where to look to find a parking space. And they lack choice because all they know is everything costs the same and it's all full near where they want to be. So the purpose of the price approach and the information approach together is to give, like, if you look at the, I think it's easiest for me to look at the left-hand view. You can see where it's green. In this particular visualizer, those green dots say there's a lot of availability. The red dot says don't go there because you won't find a space, and the orange is in between. And so if you're planning your trip, you have availability info at your fingertips. And when you start looking at price, you can make a determination about whether you want to park closer in and pay a little more because you're time sensitive or you're location sensitive, or if you want to park a few blocks away and pay less. And so by increasing the price in those highest demand areas and pushing some, in theory, this is again the theory that we're testing, pushing some parkers to choose to park elsewhere who would like to, then folks who are location sensitive and need to be closer instead of searching and not finding, will actually find a space. They will have to pay a little bit more, but we've eliminated the circling the block, we've eliminated the sense of uncertainty and the wondering how long it's going to take you, like how much time should I add on to my trip to see my friends, which is just the search for a street parking space. So there are benefits to be gained, and certainly in our outreach to community members, I think that's this slide, the prioritization among priorities and the statements that they gave us were really about improving the overall experience and saving time. And those were all more important, relatively speaking, than just simply keeping the price low.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Have any questions?
One question. This tool can potentially, from my viewpoint, create a product that Arlington police could use in their traffic enforcement. Has there been in discussions with Chief Penn and his staff?
So we have had discussions with the traffic parking enforcement people that we work with, yes. And that's actually a specific, I don't have a good slide for it yet because we're still working on the dashboard visualizations that show it. But what we know, we've already been able to see that only about 50% of parking time is paid for today in most parts of the study area. So that means meters are operating, but 50% of the time when people are parking, they're not feeding the meter. So you've got the financial people who are like, let's go get some more of that money. Those are metered hours that we should be getting revenue from. But then we have the police who have limited resources, trying to figure out how to prioritize them. So one of our key strategies each quarter as we analyze the data is a plan to push to them what I'll call a digestible top 5 worst performing areas as far as compliance is concerned, so that they can focus their enforcement resources on them to try to improve compliance. And we will continue to look at what is the top 5, what should it really be? Is it really least compliance, or is it least compliance of high demand? Because maybe that's better if you try to enforce on least compliance on a low demand block, it doesn't really help anyone as much because you haven't freed up space, there's already space. And there might be other reasons why that's happening. So it's definitely in our sites. We have, we're working on the data process, so because we don't want to overwhelm them with data. So we're not just going to give them the map of the whole project area colorized or something, but we're going to give them something that they can actually act on.
Okay, sounds good. And then one other question, and there might be a couple, but I'll try to keep it short. Based upon the data, particularly during the holidays, are the staff considering potentially expanding enforcement for certain holidays? Because I know sometimes when I go to some parts of Arlington during the holidays, traffic can still be a headache, and I know that can be a time where more consumers go to to shop, but particularly we just want to make sure, is staff looking at that?
So I would say that we haven't focused in that granularity on the calendar. I do think that we see seasonal variation on parking activity. We certainly see seasonal variation in revenue over the course of the year. But it is an interesting question. Our parking meters don't run on the proper holiday days, so they're free. And when they're free, what we already see in our data is that when the parking is free, people park more. So our Sunday data shows the highest occupancy across the county, across the week, pretty much no matter what. And it's interesting to us because on the one hand, there might not be a lot of appetite for metering on Sundays, frankly, but it's a good case study to show that even our baseline, which is the $1.75 on those regular meters, is doing something, because that $1.75 is creating slightly more sensible parking behavior than when you make it free. So holidays are free. It means that on the holiday proper, where it's more of a free-for-all, and there's the potential, if people aren't home with their families, that they're out, competing for this finite resource. But I think that your point is interesting because we certainly could look around the holiday time periods and see if the behavior is such that police, like parking enforcement, could get extra precise information about what's going on in certain neighborhoods. Some of it they might already know, it like instinctually from their long-term anecdotal experience, but it's certainly something that we could look into.
And then for the fee set on the quarterly schedule, does staff plan on engaging with the community when they are considering a fee increase? I know it goes up to $5, but for some Arlingtonians that can be a bit pricey. So was that in the implementation plans?
So a consultation is not in the implementation plan. This 3-month process is actually pretty tight, believe it or not, because what we're going to do is we're going to collect essentially 2 months of data. We're going to crunch the data, and they're going to feed, our vendors are going to feed it to us as sort of a raw price proposal that uses some triggers. I gave an example of what this could look like, the 80% and 40%. So if we see the proposal from them saying these areas are 80%, you should consider an increase, and staff are taking that information. These areas are 40%, you should, or less, you should consider a decrease. We take it into consideration. We look at what's going on. We look at time of day, because the other thing is over the course of the day, you might have one day average to be high, but because we have to look, it's not going to be the 24-hour day, right? And so we might look at a peak 3 hours or peak 4 hours of behavior, and is it hitting a threshold? But then if it's always a similar peak number of hours, we might focus on a time of day pricing strategy first. So we won't increase the price for the entire day when we know that morning hours in that neighborhood are just not that busy. We'll increase it for a period of time when we have to actually move the needle on how people are accessing the blocks. So we have to crunch those numbers and have the deliberations. We're feeding our recommendation to the manager to get sign off or buy-in. And then we have to feed it to the meter companies to get them to put it into the system, because that's how every meter will show the right price. And that's not, unfortunately, a flip of the switch. It's going to take them a little bit of time, and each meter company is a little different. So our communication strategy for the quarterly process is to prepare a package every time that explains to the community what we're changing, where we're changing it, the reasons why, and showing examples of the data and why we're making that choice then. And throughout the process, and I kind of glossed over this in the interest of time, but way here at the end, VDOT has a companion system optimization team that's actually separately funded, separately run, looking at our project goals and helping us measure performance against our project goals using some different tools than we have at our disposal. They're going to be using our CCTV cameras to capture footage and do a modeling assessment of double parking and things that they can see, the behaviors they can see on that camera footage in some specific study areas as things change to see if we're reducing those negative externalities. They're also initiating a sort of qualitative feedback process through QR codes at meters and Park Mobile tool. So when people park, in theory, if all goes well, you park in one of these areas before or after the project starts, and Park Mobile will pop up and say, "We see you parked. Can you rate your experience?" And it will ask you for your experiential point of view on how all of that went. So we recognize people will have opinions about the price, whether they like it or not. But we also think people will have opinions about whether or not the experience is getting better. And the goal is over the course of time to see those ratings get better in the areas where prices are changing. So that's an example of another type of feedback that we are going to be getting throughout. But there won't be a threshold public process to approve it, because we won't really have the time.
Yeah, that sounds good. And, it's probably working in customer experience is probably an informal way of capturing that. I am curious to know, based upon your research on other municipalities that have piloted this, what does the compliance look like once fees are increased? Because there might be the occasional driver that says, $1.75 was already too much, you're upping it, I'm just not gonna pay it and take the risk.
Right.
In a locality where we're struggling to hire more parking enforcement workers.
Right.
Were you able to see an example case of that in a locality?
Yes, and I don't remember seeing data about it in every other case study that we looked at, but I believe at least in San Francisco and maybe more, we did see essentially people's receiving of tickets go down. So there might be revenue, there was revenue in all instances, there was even when the average price, so in some of these communities, the average price of parking went down because they lowered prices in a lot of places and only raised them in these targeted areas. So the average price went down for what people were experiencing across the board, and there were basically the experience of fewer infractions or less opportunity to end up with an infraction. So I don't remember the exact sources of the data, like what they were basing it on, but it seemed like it was not averse to the compliance goal. And I have a sense that that's probably in part because they have options now. So someone who doesn't want to pay a higher price can actually pay a lower price. And in areas, a hypothesis that I have that I'm interested to see if it pans out is that in areas today that are all the same, right, 175, but it's a lower demand area where people might be choosing to park somewhere else where they can park for free, or maybe they're not paying the meter because they're hedging their bets. If we lower it, and it's now $1, again, these lower demand areas, we might lower the threshold for compliance because now they're willing to, and the relative benefit of getting a ticket versus paying the lower rate has started to change their calculation in their heads. So I think there's potential for behavior change in like a bunch of different ways that relate to this. And it's hard for us to predict what the influence is really going to be.
Yes. And that's all the questions I have.
Well, okay, so on the phone, are there any commissioners with questions? Okay, so I have a couple though. When All May Park, All Must Pay was created, that policy. One of the things that this commission paid a lot of attention to were how many parking spaces that were considered accessible, had accessible parking meters. And this, of course, was in a day when there were single parking meters rather than, multi-parking meters. Yeah. So what I'm wondering, and the other thing was that though you couldn't necessarily do anything about the parking, the dimensions of the parking space on the street, you could make the meters accessible. And so I'm wondering, is this project using single meters like that are available in different parts, that are going to be available in different parts of the commercial districts or in the county itself?
Yes, so within the project area, any metered parking space is a participating space. So whether it has a multi-meter on it or a single space meter. So we do have, we obviously have single space meters. I think they're on all of our accessible spaces today, differentiated from the zone and but it might not be all of them, but there are a lot of them that still are out there as single space meters. And so when we work with our meter vendors to push the prices out, we're working with 3. We work with Park Mobile, doing it on the mobile apps. We work with IPS, is the single space meter vendor, and they still operate those single space meters throughout the county. And we're working with Calais Flowbird, which is the vendor that operates our multi-space meters.
So are you establishing a certain number of accessible meters per number of regular meters?
This project is not changing the number of accessible spaces that are out there today, at least not in any comprehensive way. So one of the things that we are expecting to do, especially as we look at accessible space occupancy, so basically you can envision it as the data from each accessible space is data we can differentiate from the rest of the set, so we can look at their utilization separately. We can look at it in comparison to nearby regular spaces. So one of the examples of potential side effect benefit for a parker who usually relies on an accessible space is if you've got a big block with one accessible space and a bunch of always full 2-hour metered parking, if we succeed by changing price and information and getting that full metered parking next to the accessible space to taper off a little bit, we could create more availability on the whole block. And that's availability that anyone can use who is looking to park right on that block. So we might be able to see some benefits that way. But the other thing we can see is if our accessible spaces are highly utilized in some parts of town, we might want to add more. And that's something that we have on the table. It's not something that we have to slow down or speed up. Staff are able to change the curb space as needed today. We would continue to do that through the project. We would just have this new data point to offer us. And we expect that in some parts of town, those spaces may be less utilized, but in others, they might be very highly utilized. And if so, we might want to expand access to more of them.
So one of the things that I was also curious about is you had mentioned that there were time limits on how long you can park, right? And if you extend your parking time, the price goes up, right? So originally, the idea was at the accessible parking meters, that a person with a disability parking there would get extra time.
Yes.
That's when we're using individual devices, right? So, and this is because it's certainly observed by many people, and there was a lot of testimony about, it takes longer to go in and come back out.
Yeah, totally.
Remount into your car or your van. So I'm wondering whether that, and a lot of people who are going to be using those spaces are have lower incomes. So it was also important to provide the extra time and the extras at the space. So how are you going to be able to account for that, since it was actually original part of the parking designs for the system in Arlington? And something that was very important because a lot of people coming to with disabilities coming from other jurisdictions like Arlington or Fairfax, for a long time wouldn't come to Arlington because of all May Park, all May must pay.
Yeah, so I can tell you, thank you for that observation, because the specific relationship between our current policy, which still exists, it's still the way we enforce the spaces today, where accessible spaces and accessible parkers in any space can park twice the duration of stay as a regular parker. So if you have a placard in your car, you don't have to be in an accessible space to access that privilege. That's part of the way your vehicle as marked is enforced. So that's all true today. That would be true through the pilot. And what I thought was interesting is I haven't played out in my head, and I don't think my team has, how if we applied an escalating rate structure to a space, that would pertain to that. Because if you in theory, we can't differentiate between parkers in the price structure because we don't have those individual. The most individualized we can get is maybe your Park Mobile account or something. But if you're just paying a meter, you would be paying the rate the meter would charge you. So I take that into consideration because I think that would affect whether we thought it was feasible and where to apply the experience with an escalating structure, because that structure in particular does try to make it cost more the longer you stay. One thing, just sort of improvising here, that it might imply is that the rate doesn't escalate at hour 1. It might escalate at hour 3 or something in order to ensure that there's more time for within that first period of time before the prices start to get more expensive. But I appreciate that point because I don't think that had been. We haven't gotten that far down the road in thinking about how and where that structure would be the most appropriate. So I appreciate it.
So is the implementation for this project something that's coming before the county board?
Yes, ma'am. In December, we are planning to bring the request to advertise, because this is an ordinance change. So in the December docket, the board would see the advertisement request, and the docket would contain the proposed ordinance language. And if all goes well, that hits in December's board meeting, and then January is when the board would act upon it. So right before the December meeting is when we'll be having our open house, and then the December meeting docket gets posted shortly thereafter. That again is the advertisement docket. The board sees it in like the second week of December, and then there's a month of the open advertisement period for the board to receive comment from the community, and then they make a decision on that advertised action in the January meeting.
So the final vote would be in January?
Correct. If we stay on schedule, it could get pushed. There's a little bit of uncertainty, but that's what we're on track for today. And the first rate change proposal would occur no earlier on that schedule than February 1.
Any last question?
I just had one further question. It's Karen O'Donnell. So as you envision implementing this project, must a parker use a mobile app?
No.
Park. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm thinking about situations that I'm aware of a disabled person and their caregiver is never in 1,000 years going to download a mobile app.
Yep. Park. No, you can use, it doesn't change in any way the ways people pay today. So if you use the multimeter, you go up to the multimeter and it will tell you the new price. And if you go to a single space meter, it will also tell you the new price.
Okay,
so you'll always have that. Yeah.
So you're going to have an input session, right? So are you coming back to tell us what happens there before the county board takes it up?
This is the input session before the advertisement. So I guess I would say if it's important to see me again before the action, we can talk about when that meeting is, and I can come back, and it would be a refresher on all of this material if you want to vote on something. If you want to see if there have been any other tweaks in the advertisement process. Yeah, but we're coming up on it pretty soon. So certainly everything in the presentation is where things stand, and very soon with the advertisement docket, you would get to see the actual ordinance language. But it's no different than the thematic topics that I've talked about. It's just the technical version of it.
And what other commissions or boards or committees?
So I'm going to skim back to that page. So far in the fall, I've been in front of the Transportation Commission with this presentation, the Planning Commission with this presentation, and the Information Technology Advisory Committee with this presentation, the same one that covers the ordinance proposals. And these are all the commissions that I saw in the spring timeframe on the project overall. So in addition, we've been talking to the business improvement districts, and I have presented at the National Landing Transportation Subcommittee and that sort of thing. And we have a full, for folks for whom it's accessible, we have a full recorded audio and sort of video slide presentation on the project that goes into more detail than my slides from tonight. It's already on the website. So that's also something that I encourage folks to take a look at.
And then what about the Commission on Aging?
We have not been in front of them.
I would strongly recommend that, because I think the use case that I recommended is common.
Mm-hmm.
That if the technology is changing, it's very intimidating.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great point. And again, the payment options don't change for folks, but the point about how we encourage people to try to use the information, the two visualizations that I described, one of them is you can see it on your computer as well as on a phone, so you don't have to view it only on a mobile device. But yeah, I'm happy to reach out to the Commission on Aging.
Thank you.
So that because if since you spelled out that timeline, you know, others might be here at that next meeting, and might also you might also be able to take a support any suggestions you might have. So how are we doing with time? We have another presentation right on housing.
Yes, it's 8:32.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for coming.
My pleasure.
So it's Crystal houses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Six,
he's setting
right?
that.
Still have 6.
Hello, everyone.
Did you want me to put the PowerPoint up, or were you gonna, you got it? Okay, perfect, we do.
Yep. Can you can see my screen now? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Danny Ross. I'm a project manager for APA. We're Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. And with me is also Kevin Pennington. He's our architect at KGD. And I'll be talking to you about Crystal House 6, which is the first phase in the Crystal Houses development in Crystal City. So at APA, we have a vision that everyone deserves a place to call home, a foundation to live their dreams, which informs our mission, which is we exist to provide affordable housing and resident-centered programming to help our residents make the most of their home. So we're all about more than just building affordable housing. We really strive for, providing high-quality environments where people can truly thrive. So again, we're a mission-driven housing developer. We currently own over 2,300 homes with another 1,400 or more actually in active pre-development pipeline. Our focus is on providing housing that's affordable to anywhere from 30% up to 60% of the area median income. And we recently have increased, including a 10% permanent supportive housing function as well. So again, we promote opportunity and stability of our residents. We are no longer just in Arlington. We are now in 5 jurisdictions throughout the DMV. We're a top developer, one of the best places to work in Arlington. So again, resident services is a big focus on what we do. So we have a 16-person and growing resident service staff, and they really look at the needs of individual residents property to property. So it's not like a one size fits all. There's actually a considerable amount of different programs that we have. And so Crystal House 6 is a dedicated senior housing population. And so we have specific adult health and wellness programs through our resident services. And we're also partnering with the county for specific services for additional need. So, and zooming out from Crystal House 6, where that project is, it's between 22nd Street South and 18th Street South, and South Eads and South Fern. So it's that block. Existing there today are two towers. They're known as Crystal House. It's Crystal House Tower 1 and Tower 2. And so the greater Crystal House project is the new buildings that'll be built in what is currently surface parking lots around those two towers. And so you can see that here in this site plan. Crystal House 6 is the first of those to be built along 18th Street. It's 80 units, senior housing. Crystal House 3 would come shortly thereafter. That's another affordable housing property with would be dedicated to families. And across the campus, it's really it's intended to be mixed mixed income and mixed age ranges, and really just be a full and diverse campus. Crystal Houses 1 and 2 will remain as they are today. I believe they've undergone some renovations, and the current owner does rent a number of those units out at the 80% area median income for the workforce housing. And so in terms of phasing, Crystal 6, we plan to start early work, which is just sort of moving around some initial infrastructure at the beginning of next year, and then the later part of next year starting construction and then completing 2026. Like I said, Crystal House 3 would come on just a year behind that. And then there's two parks that are also being developed as part of the larger campus. There's a park right sort of mid-block along Eads, and then also at the corner of 22nd and Fern. And then along Fern Street is a for sale product, which is being developed by our partner EYA. And then Crystal House 4 is a market rate rental building also being developed by EYA. Crystal House 5 would be affordable family developed by APA later at the end. So back to Crystal House 6. Like I said, it's an 80-unit building. It is predominantly one bedroom. There are 9 two-bedrooms. We have designed the building specifically with seniors in mind. All of the core amenity spaces are on the ground level with easy access, and the elevator core in the middle connects to the subterranean parking and then up to the units above. In addition to a senior-focused fitness center, we're also providing a wellness room, which is for visiting physicians to do medical check-ins. There's also like immunization type fairs, blood pressure checks, those types of activities. We have a large community room that was designed to be divisible. Like I said, we have a very robust resident service staff, and so they wanted to have the ability to have multiple activities going on at the same time. So that divisible room was important to them, while also being able to open up to a much larger event. Just an example, they are currently throwing a senior prom at our Oakwood site, just I think next weekend. So in addition to the typical leasing office, we also have a separate resident service office, and we're also working with the county to provide them with meeting space. The building is designed to be sustainable. We're getting an Earthcraft Gold certification. Let's see here. So this is a view at the corner coming off of 18th Street as you would enter onto the Crystal House's property. And that's Crystal House 1 and the rear view there. And so this is sort of the main entrance, which also features a pickup drop-off area with a covered space. And we actually had to fight to preserve this because it wasn't a part of the original design. And so we worked to get this into the design with the specific, needs of our seniors in mind. There's also a front patio and a rear patio. This front patio we kind of call the front porch, just sort of a collective meeting space, which has visibility on both that pickup drop-off, but also another pedestrian entrance that's off of 18th Street. And then this is if you were standing on the opposite side of 18th Street looking back, and you could see Crystal House 6 in the foreground and the existing Crystal House 1 tower in the background there. And then this is that second pedestrian entrance that I mentioned off of 18th Street. And then this is to the north looking back at the property. And so just hopefully that's readable for you all. This is that core amenity space on the ground level. And so this is the main entrance where the pickup drop-off is. Large lobby space here, the divisible community rooms, the front porch here, the central mail room, which we've kind of expanded out, and it'll also have package lockers and just sort of various meeting places to kind of socialize and sort through mail. This is up here, the leasing office, which includes all the typical leasing activity, file storage, meeting spaces. And then off of this main core, this is the main elevator lobby, which, like I said, will go below ground parking and then up to the units above. And then off of that corridor is the wellness check-in room, the fitness room, and then the back patio. And then this takes you back down out this way to the that other pedestrian entrance that I had mentioned, a business center for residents to use the computer or print. And then that's got the resident service office immediately adjacent, which we find is helpful with seniors that might need assistance with, printing and the computers that are there as well. And so looking at a typical floor plan, they're mostly one bedrooms. They're 100% of them are universal design, and we have 8 that are dedicated as accessible. And I'll let Kevin dive a little bit more into that and answer some questions on that if we have any. But essentially what you have is, you have it's a roll-in shower, and then just overall, more accessibility features throughout the unit. I'd also add a couple of features that we've added. Typically with affordable housing, your laundry is in sort of common area laundry rooms. But with this project, we've included a washer and dryer in all of the units. And we also have added a balcony space as much as we could. It does add a lot of cost to the project, but we really felt that it was important for the seniors to have that space. I'll turn it over to Kevin. If you're here, you want to touch on any other architectural features of the units or anything I maybe have missed?
No, I think Danny really covered all the points. Yeah, everything is universally designed, as Danny said. The kitchen, we have a number of units that are also UFAS units, and specifically those are designed so that the kitchens will have accessible need spaces next to the range where you can roll in and access the range. And all the appliances and all the units have front controls, whether it's the washer, the dryer, or the range in the kitchen for ease of accessibility. The refrigerators, everything's fully compliant within the unit. And the ANSI A-types, as I'm sure you're aware, just have additional ANSI A-type features. Part of the universal design requires that the bathrooms for the 72 other units have greater accessibility as well. And that's about all I can think of. I think Danny covered most everything else.
Okay, so I'd like to have my colleagues ask any questions that they'd like, but I'd like to start this time. So there are 80 units in the whole building.
Right.
That's correct.
That's the total, right? And then 8 that are type A, fully accessible with a roll-in shower.
No, not all 8 have roll-in showers. 2 have roll-in showers.
I'm sorry?
All 8 do not have roll-in showers. Only 2 of them are required to have the roll-in showers. The other have, because it's universal design, they have all the provisions for the grab bars, but not all units have roll-in showers, not all the accessible A units.
What kind of funding are you using tax credit funding?
That's right. Yes, this is a 4% tax credit, LIHTC, and then we also have state.
It's only 4%.
That's right.
Okay, I see. So what you're doing is the minimum building code requirement for type A units.
Actually, we are doing slightly above, because if it was building code minimum, only 1 roll-in shower would be required. We're providing 1 roll-in shower for a 1-bedroom unit, and then for also a 2-bedroom unit.
So, but it's only 2 in the whole building, right?
Correct.
And I believe the UFAS requirement was.
I also
5%.
wanted to ask if you are complying with the standard site plan convention of automatic doors.
Yes.
At the main lobby and at the garage.
At the main lobby coming in on 18th Street from the front, and also on the side door that has the porte cochere cover. Those both have the paddle access for the doors.
Automatic, right?
Automatic doors.
Sensor.
Well, they're paddle activated. It's not that you walk up and the sensor opens the door. They are paddle activated.
Okay, and could you also, you said all 80 are going to be for seniors, right? All
That's
80
right.
units. Yeah, okay, so when you said all of them will meet universal design, can you explain to us what that means?
Sure.
What are the features that universal design that are going to be universal design?
It's kind of a long standard, but generally speaking, there's additional accessibility requirements around the bathtubs. There's it's a long standard. I'm trying to think through. In the kitchens, there's also more accessibility required in there as well. We can't have any stacking washer dryers. Everything needs to be accessible from the front. I'm trying to just only capture what is universal design. A certain amount of the parking spaces are wider than Arlington County standards. In this case, 5 of the parking spaces are 9 feet wide.
Okay, but they're just
marginally wider.
Common area, right? The common area.
Right.
Okay, so because the units are actually, for most of the stuff that you are there going to be load-bearing walls in the bathroom? In the bathroom, the grab bars and stuff? Yes, there will be grab bars in all of the ANSI A units, and every single other unit will have the blocking put in the wall for future grab bars if needed. That's something Danny can probably confirm this, but if a resident needs the grab bars, they can be installed because the blocking is required on the first install. Yeah. So I'm actually, because it sounds to me like what you're doing is constructing units that will meet the Fair Housing Act standard mostly. and because universal design really isn't a standard, and it's not in the building codes. Well, I guess my colleagues may have some other questions. My concern is that that only having 2 units that are, fully type A accessible in a building for seniors is kind of designing a building that people might only be using for a short period of time. What makes these senior? Are you saying their age? There's an age requirement?
Yeah, so it would be for ages 62 and above.
So is this getting federal funding?
It's a LIHTC project, so it's part of the tax credit program, but we're just applying through state of Virginia. There's no federal funds.
Oh no, I meant was it actually designated as senior assisted, federally assisted?
No.
Complex, no. So, anybody have questions that they want to ask? In the room?
Yeah, just curious. I know we're focused on Crystal House 6 here, but what does universal design and type A housing look like for the rest of the project?
So we don't really know what specifically EYA is doing yet, and we're still in the early parts of design for Crystal House 3. So we don't really technically know yet. I mean, Kevin might have a better idea, but we are still in early stages of design for that. It's a family project.
So on Crystal House 3, and please don't hold me to these numbers because I'm going off memory, because it is a 4% 9% split, and on the 9% side, I believe 90 of the units were going to be universal design, and then on the 4% side 10%. But there's a metric like that where the 9% is going to get more universal design than is normally required.
Thank you.
Is this a hybrid project or is it just a 4% project?
So that's a hybrid. It would be both 9% and 4%.
There are two buildings. There are two buildings.
So it's one building, but it technically has sort of the aspects of 2 buildings within 1 building. That's kind of how it works.
Sorry,
it's more of a technicality. We basically condo out half the building.
I'm sorry.
This is Commissioner Karen Odon. I noticed on your architect, I salute you for putting the washer and dryer, the single units in each unit as somebody who has elderly parents. I noted from your drawings, though, that because of the location of that laundry room, it is a long walk from the bedroom to get to the bathroom. And so I'm very curious about your choice of where you put that laundry room, because I've seen other configurations that in senior housing, they just put the washer and the dryer in an alcove kitchen. So I don't need a long explanation, it's late, but I did notice that, and I'm married to an architect, I noticed those things.
Yeah, just trying to pull up the plans real quick.
That's an issue with elderly parents. The distance to the bathroom is really important.
Danny, could you pull up those unit plans that you had?
Yeah.
Now I think I found what I wanted.
Yeah, that's the bedroom.
Right. So for most of those units, you're going to be able to walk through the closet into the bathroom. So you
Yeah.
do have direct access from the bathroom without having to walk through the other space. It's just when we get into the design of some of these units that that are more accessible, where it's a limited footprint that we have to work with. And so having this bathroom that needs to serve both, any visitors that come into the space as well as the resident who lives there, it always has to have accessibility from the main living space. So it's just a function of trying to fit everything that we're needing to accommodate for the seniors. And this, it's actually a fairly generous footprint for a modern one bedroom living unit.
Okay.
So you said that the kitchens are gonna meet UFAS, the bathrooms as well?
Yeah, yes, they are. Yeah, there's a certain percentage that are. Well, everything is fully UFAS compliant as part of the building. So, as such, that brings in a couple of other sections of the code. So we will have some visually hearing, visually hearing, and audibly impaired units with extra horns and strobes to help those residents out. But yeah, 100% of the units are UFAS compliant.
Oh, really? So, because I know the UFAS bathrooms are very, very large. Very large. You know? Because it was made for fully accessible designs. So usually they're roll-in shower units as well.
Well, a certain percentage are required to have the roll-in showers, and we're meeting those percentages. But yeah, they are fully compliant with UFAS as designed.
Is anyone on the phone who wants to ask any questions? I don't know whether they're still there.
I think that's it. Yeah, there's no commission, there's nobody on, it's just them.
So what is the process going forward? When is this going to go to the county board?
So this phase,
Right?
yeah. So this was all part of an originally approved existing site plan, and so we go through a individual site plan amendment for each phase. And this first phase, Crystal House 6, has been approved by the county board for the changes. So we're advancing to building permit for this particular phase. Crystal House 3, we have just submitted to the county to review the site plan amendment for that particular phase of it.
So the site plan design has already gone through the county board
For Crystal House 6, yes.
So what about affordable units? What's the deal there? How many of those on site?
So these for Crystal House 6, it's 100% affordable. So all of the units in Crystal House 6 will be made available to people at 60% of area median income or less. And we actually, because of the senior population, really have targeted more the 50% range. And then we have 8 of the units are at 30% AMI.
And the rest are 40 and 50?
No, really, it's mostly 30 and 50.
Okay, and will the type A units have laundry equipment as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because that became a problem, particularly at the Springs. So is this a project that we can what aspects of this project are we able to comment on at this point, if any?
I mean, I think if there's any like technical advice or suggestions, we also are in the early stages of really planning out the resident programming. Marquand, our head of resident services, serves on several boards, but he's looking to really expand our resident services for our disabled residents. And so really any advice or suggestions on that type of thing would be welcome or helpful.
Okay. I would personally like to say I'm kind of really disappointed that even if you aren't applying for the 9% tax credits, that would require 10%, at least 10% of the units to be fully accessible type A's. That I am honestly really concerned that there aren't more type A units in there that could be available to more seniors, because physical disability and aging, frequently go together. Of course, it also goes together with hearing loss and vision loss, but and I'm also kind of surprised maybe that there aren't more more affordable used units and a deeper affordability. And so how long how long are these units that are affordable? How long are they affordable for? I mean, in perpetuity, or 30 years, or 60 years?
Yeah, so I mean, APA is a mission-driven nonprofit that this is what we do. So, there's no reason why these wouldn't be affordable for a very long time. There is, I think it's 30 years is the minimum, but we don't sell our properties. I mean, it's going to be affordable for many years to come, and all of the partners that we have involved in this project, I think that this is a long-term affordable housing. This isn't something that's being built to sell.
Courtney, I did want to clarify one thing. We are providing 10% type A. We're providing 8 type A units, and not all type A units are required to have roll-in showers.
Oh, I realize that. I mean, there's the building code requirement, but, APA was one of the leaders at the beginning of ensuring kind of a more adequate supply of type A units. So, I mean, that being the default, if somebody wants a bathtub in there, there's reasonable accommodations requests, but you have to have the unit built to type A specifications from the get-go. You can't expand really the size of the unit. But that's my feel. Is this coming? So you're just giving a presentation for us. This is not on the schedule for the Housing Commission or anything right now.
No, not at the moment.
Anything else, anybody else?
No further comments.
Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right, good night.
Good night.
So, what time is it now?
9:05.
So is there a staff report that you want to need to make?
No, we can't really do reports because that'd be technically discussing business.
I had a question.
Anybody want to make a liaison report?
No liaison reports from me, but I did have one question. I noticed on my calendar there was 2 meeting dates for next month. One for the 12th and one for the 26th.
Probably not meeting on the 26th.
Yeah, that's what I was like, wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
and we're deferring the minutes, right?
Yeah.
It should be removed.
So the meeting is the 12th.
The 19th, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's the 19th.
It's the 19th.
The
yes.
19th.
I can attend.
Any announcements, anybody want?
No, no announcements from me.
So Courtney, did I forget anything?
No, I think that's good.
It was dense.
Yes, a
Well,
lot.
that was a lot of, yeah, that was
It was a lot of-
it was a lot, yeah.
It was a lot, but extremely informative, and I'm completely embroiled in elder care, so a lot of these issues are, my folks don't live here, but
Yeah, it did feel like that last presentation was more or less a rubber stamp for us.
yes, but I think
Yeah.
my